In the small town of Ravenwood, where fog perpetually clings to the ground like ghostly fingers, Sarah Miller had always felt something wasn't quite right about her grandmother's antique mirror. The ornate silver frame, tarnished by time, held secrets darker than the shadows that danced across its surface. Sarah inherited the mirror after her grandmother's mysterious disappearance 3 months ago. The police had found no leads, no clues, just an empty house and that mirror, hanging pristinely on the wall. Tonight, as Sarah prepared for bed in her new apartment, something changed. The reflection seemed different. The room behind her appeared slightly off, as if viewed through warped glass. But that wasn't what made her heart stop. It was the figure standing in the corner. A tall, gaunt woman in a Victorian dress, her face hidden beneath a black veil. Sarah spun around. The corner was empty. But when she turned back to the mirror, the woman was closer now, her head tilted at an impossible angle. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched the figure raise a pale, skeletal hand toward the glass. "Your grandmother says hello," a voice whispered, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sarah's blood turned to ice. The voice was familiar. It was her grandmother's, but wrong somehow, like hearing a beloved song played in reverse. Sarah tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The mirror's surface began to ripple like disturbed water. The veiled woman was at the glass now, her fingers pressing through, reaching into Sarah's world. The temperature in the room plummeted. "She's been so lonely here," the distorted voice continued. "We all have. Won't you join us?" The glass shattered outward, and Sarah screamed as countless hands emerged from the darkness beyond, grasping, pulling. She fought against their cold grip, but they were too strong. As she was dragged toward the mirror's empty frame, she caught a glimpse of what lay beyond, an endless maze of reflections, each one holding another trapped soul, another victim of the mirror's hunger. The last thing Sarah saw was her own reflection, now standing among the others, watching with empty eyes as the veiled woman claimed her next victim. In Ravenwood, they say if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you can hear screaming coming from the old Miller house. Some say it's just the wind, others know better. They've seen the mirror, now hanging in Sarah's abandoned apartment, waiting for its next visitor. But here's the truly terrifying part. This mirror isn't unique. There are others like it, scattered across the world, each one a gateway to that realm of endless reflections. So the next time you catch movement in a mirror's surface, or feel eyes watching you from behind the glass, ask yourself, is it really your reflection looking back at you? Or is it something else waiting patiently for the perfect moment to reach through and pull you into its world of eternal darkness? Remember, mirrors don't just show us what we look like. They show us what looks like us. And sometimes that's not the same thing at all, the end. But that's not where our story ends. Let me tell you about Claire Thompson, who discovered another one of these cursed mirrors in an old antique shop in Boston. Claire was a collector of vintage items, always searching for unique pieces to add to her collection. The mirror caught her eye immediately, its frame identical to the one that claimed Sarah Miller, though Claire wouldn't know that connection until it was too late. The shop owner practically gave it away, his hand shaking as he wrapped it in brown paper. "No refunds," he'd said, his voice trembling. "And whatever you do, don't..." But Claire was already out the door, too excited about her find to hear his warning. That night, as she hung the mirror in her study, she noticed something odd about her reflection. It seemed to move a fraction of a second too late, like an echo of her movements. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Over the next few days, Claire began to notice other strange things. Books would be in different places than where she'd left them. Her coffee would be cold when she knew she'd just poured it hot. And sometimes, just at the edge of her vision, she could swear she saw someone standing in the mirror even when she wasn't in front of it. Then the whispers started. At first, they were so quiet she thought they were just the wind and the heating vents. But they grew clearer, more distinct. They spoke of a place beyond the glass, a place where time moved differently, where memories became reality and reality became nothing but a distant dream. One voice stood out among the others, Sarah Miller's. "Claire," it would call, "we're waiting for you. We've been waiting for so long." Claire tried to get rid of the mirror. She covered it with a sheet, but the sheet would always be on the floor when she returned. She tried to give it away, but no one would take it. She even tried to break it, but the hammer passed right through it as if striking water. The final night came during a storm. Lightning illuminated her study in stark flashes, and in one of those flashes, Claire saw them all. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass from the other side, their hands leaving foggy prints as they reached for her. Sarah was there, and the veiled woman and countless others, all with the same hungry look in their eyes. The mirror began to hum, a deep vibration that shook the walls. The glass rippled and bulged, and Claire found herself walking toward it, drawn by an irresistible force. In the reflection, she saw her future, an eternity trapped in that maze of mirrors, becoming part of the chorus of whispers that lured others to their doom. But Claire had one advantage the others didn't. She'd spent years studying the occult, and in her final moments of clarity, she remembered an ancient ritual of protection. As the hands reached for her, she began to recite the words, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The mirror's surface froze, then cracked, not breaking, but fracturing into a web-like pattern. The whispers turned to screams, and Claire saw the veiled woman's face for the first time, contorted in rage behind her dark veil. Claire didn't stop. The words poured from her lips as the mirror's power fought against her. The cracks spread, glowing with an inner light. The hands retreated, the faces disappeared, and for a moment, Claire saw through to the other side, an infinite labyrinth of mirrors. Each one a prison, each one a gateway. With a sound like shattering ice, the mirror's surface hardened, the cracks becoming solid, permanent barriers. The whispers fell silent. The pull vanished. Claire had done what no one else had managed. She'd sealed the gateway. But her victory came with a price. Every mirror she looked into now showed her glimpses of that other world. Brief flashes of the faces trapped there, their silent screams forever echoing in her mind. She'd stopped them from claiming her, but she couldn't free those already taken. Sometimes, on particularly dark nights, Claire thinks she can still hear Sarah Miller's voice, calling from every reflective surface. "You can't seal all the gateways. We'll find another way. We always do." And she's right, because right now, somewhere in the world, another mirror is waiting. Another gateway is opening. Another victim is about to discover that their reflection isn't quite what it seems. So ask yourself, what's looking back at you from your mirror right now? Is it really your reflection? Or is it something else, something patient, something hungry, something that's been waiting for you all along? Sweet dreams, if you dare to close your eyes. The end. But our tale of cursed mirrors doesn't end there. Let me tell you about Marcus Chen, an antique dealer who specialized in tracking down haunted artifacts. He'd heard the whispers about Sarah Miller and Claire Thompson, and unlike most people who ran from such stories, he ran toward them. Marcus had spent decades studying the occult, collecting pieces that others deemed too dangerous to keep. His warehouse in Seattle was a maze of cursed objects, each carefully contained behind protective barriers. But the mirrors, they were his obsession. He traced their origin to a Victorian glassmaker named Edmund Blackwood, who had disappeared in 1873, along with his entire workshop of apprentices. The official story was that they had all succumbed to a mysterious illness. But Marcus had found Blackwood's journals, and they told a different tale. Blackwood had discovered a way to infuse mirrors with what he called the essence of the void, a space between realities where time and physics held no meaning. He believed he could use these mirrors as windows to other dimensions, perhaps even as gateways to immortality. The journals became increasingly erratic, filled with sketches of impossible geometries and rambling descriptions of voices that whispered from his creations. The final entry simply read, "They're beautiful, so beautiful. They want to show me everything." Marcus had spent years tracking down Blackwood's mirrors. He'd found 3 so far, the one that took Sarah, the one Claire had sealed, and now, finally, the original. It sat before him in his study, its silver frame decorated with intricate carvings of eyes and hands reaching through rippling water. He'd prepared for this moment. The room was lined with protective sigils. Cameras recorded from every angle. He wore a pendant that Claire had given him, infused with the same protective magic she'd used to seal her mirror. "Show me your secrets," he whispered, placing his hand on the cool glass surface. At first, nothing happened. Then, like ink spreading through water, darkness began to seep from the edges of the mirror. Marcus smiled. This was what he'd been waiting for. But something was wrong. The pendant around his neck grew cold, then shattered. The protective sigils on the walls began to fade, as if being erased by an invisible hand. In the mirror, he saw them all. Sarah, Blackwood, and his apprentices, countless others, their faces pressed against the glass like insects trapped in amber. And behind them, moving through their ranks like a shark through schools of fish, was the veiled woman. "We've been waiting for someone like you, Marcus," the voices whispered in unison. "Someone who understands. Someone who wants to know everything." Marcus tried to pull his hand away, but it had sunk into the glass up to his wrist. The surface felt like liquid ice. He could see his reflection beginning to fade, becoming transparent, revealing the endless maze beyond. "Your research was impressive," the voices continued, "but incomplete. Let us show you what Blackwood really discovered. Let us show you the truth about the void." As the glass claimed him, Marcus saw something that made him scream. Not the maze of mirrors, not the trapped souls, but what lay behind them all. The true nature of the void, the reason the veiled woman wore her veil. They found his warehouse 3 days later, after neighbors reported strange lights and sounds. The mirror was gone, along with all his research. All that remained was a journal entry in his handwriting, but those who read it said it didn't sound like him at all. The mirrors aren't gateways, they're eyes, and now they've seen you too. Look closely at your reflection tonight. Is it still moving when you are perfectly still? Is it still watching when you close your eyes? The void has always been there, behind every reflection, waiting to be noticed. And once you notice it, it notices you. They say Marcus's final journal is now in a secure facility somewhere, its pages filled with warnings and revelations about the true nature of reflections. But sometimes, late at night, the guards say they can hear scratching coming from inside the sealed container where it's kept, as if someone, or something, is writing new entries. And if you look closely at any mirror after hearing this story, you might notice something too. A slight delay in your reflection's movements. A shadow that doesn't quite match your own. A face that's not quite yours looking back. Because now you know the truth about mirrors, and more importantly, they know you know the end. But there's one last chapter to this story that few know about. It concerns Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Marcus's sister, and her desperate attempt to save her brother after his disappearance. Elizabeth had always thought her brother's obsession with cursed artifacts was dangerous, but she'd never imagined it would lead to this. When she found his warehouse empty, the original mirror gone, she knew exactly what had happened. She'd seen it before, in the security footage from his cameras, footage that ended with her brother's final scream. Unlike Marcus, who sought to understand the mirrors, Elizabeth had only one goal: destruction. She spent months tracking down every scrap of information about Edmund Blackwood and his cursed creations. Her research led her to something Marcus had missed: Blackwood's wife's diary. The diary revealed that before the mirrors, Edmund Blackwood had been a different man. He'd created beautiful, normal mirrors, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship. But then he'd discovered something in an ancient text, a formula for treating the silver backing of mirrors with what he called void essence. What Blackwood didn't know, but his wife had suspected, was that the text itself was a trap. The void essence wasn't just a chemical formula, it was an invitation. By creating those mirrors, Blackwood hadn't just made windows to another dimension. He'd made doors, and he'd given something permission to enter our world. Elizabeth found the text hidden in the false bottom of her brother's desk. The pages seemed to move under her fingers, the letters shifting like insects. But among the warnings and dark rituals, she found what she was looking for: a way to end it. The Veiled Woman, the entity that ruled the mirror realm, could only exist in our world through reflections. Each mirror was a foothold, a piece of territory claimed. But if enough mirrors were destroyed in the right way, with the right words spoken, the entity's grip on our reality would weaken. Elizabeth began her work. She tracked down every mirror she could find that matched Blackwood's design. Some were in antique shops, others in private collections. A few had already claimed victims. Each one required a different ritual, a different approach. Some could be shattered with blessed objects. Others had to be melted down while specific psalms were recited. But with each mirror she destroyed, strange things began to happen. Her own reflection started to lag behind her movements. Shadows and mirrored surfaces would reach for her when she passed. And sometimes, a moment between sleep and waking, she could hear her brother's voice calling out to her from every reflective surface in her room. "Stop this, Elizabeth," he pleaded. "You don't understand what you're destroying. The void, it's not what we thought. It's so much more. Let me show you." But Elizabeth didn't stop. She couldn't. She'd seen what these mirrors did to people, what they'd done to her brother. And she knew that for every mirror she found, there were others still hidden, waiting to be discovered by some unsuspecting soul. The final mirror, the one that had taken Marcus, proved the most difficult to track down. It had passed through 17 different owners in the past month, each one falling victim to its power. When Elizabeth finally found it in a small estate sale in Vermont, it was already too late for the family selling it. As she prepared for the final ritual, standing before the mirror in a room lined with protective sigils, she saw them all: Sarah Miller, Claire Thompson, her brother Marcus, Edmund Blackwood and his apprentices, and countless others, their faces pressed against the glass, watching her with a mixture of hope and horror. And behind them all, the Veiled Woman stood, her dark veil rippling like smoke. For the first time, she spoke directly to Elizabeth. "You cannot undo what has been done," the voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "These souls are mine. Their reflections belong to me, and soon, so will yours." Elizabeth felt the pull of the mirror, stronger than any she'd faced before. Her reflection began to move independently, reaching out toward her with a beckoning hand. But she stood her ground and began the ritual. The words were ancient, older than Blackwood's text, older than the entity itself. As Elizabeth spoke them, the mirror's surface began to crack. Not like glass, but like ice over deep water. The faces behind the glass screamed in 1,000 voices. The veiled woman lunged forward, her veil falling away to reveal. But Elizabeth didn't flinch. She spoke the final word just as the entity reached the glass. The mirror exploded inward, taking the veiled woman and all her captive souls with it. In that final moment, Elizabeth saw her brother one last time. He was smiling, free at last, but victory came with a price. Elizabeth Chen disappeared that day, leaving behind only her research and a warning. The mirrors are gone, but the void remains. It watches us from every reflection, waiting for someone else to invite it in. So when you look in a mirror and see something looking back, pray it's only your reflection. They found her journal 3 days later. The final entry reads, "I understand now what Marcus meant. The void isn't evil, it's simply hungry, and it has infinite patience. I've destroyed its doors, but I can't destroy its windows. Every reflection, every mirrored surface, every pool of still water, they're all thin spots between our world and theirs. The best I can do is warn you, never trust your reflection. Never stare too long into a mirror. And if you ever see a woman in a black veil standing behind you, don't turn around, just run.